The 7th episode of Andor finally gave us a real glimpse into the formation of the rebellion, as Mon Mothma kicked her alliance plan into 4th gear. At the same time though, the Senator alluded to the fact that she's now using the post-Clone Wars Separatist movement as a distraction instead. In today's video, we're going to talk about the fate of the Separatists after Order 66, and the relation to the Empire, so keep watching. First off, the Separatists survived the Clone Wars. Even though the Star Wars story takes place in a galaxy far, far away, with goofy aliens, the political ideologies it brings to the table still feel incredibly complex. The Separatists, for instance, have always been in a gray area where they're trying to end the Republic's corruption while being backed by an even more corrupt regime. Of course, they were just mere tools created by Palpatine and Count Dooku to knock the Republic off their Sith shenanigans. But Andor has given us a whole new perspective on the movement after its failure in the Clone Wars. The show's 7th episode announcement confirmed that the Separatists are not only alive and kicking in the wake of the Empire, but they're being backed by none other than Mon Mothma. Now, obviously, the Senator has turned into a bit of a laughingstock within the Assembly for voicing her concerns regarding the movement, and no one seems to pay any heed to what she's saying. That's the thing though, she's actually playing a game of chess on a completely different board, as while she's quote-unquote leading the Separatist coalition, it's just meant to be a distraction from her real battle against the Empire. What's more, this single piece of information not only tells us about their clashes with Imperial politics, but also about their allegiance to the eventual Rebel Alliance. Oh, and what makes this even more fascinating is the fact that the two friendly factions harbor totally different ideologies. Up next, the Separatists are a political minority. The Separatists were pretty much nullified in Revenge of the Sith, and shows like The Bad Batch and the Clone Wars were also very clear about their droid military shutting down. Also, let's not forget that their entire council was essentially assassinated. In fact, even their capital world of Raxus was seized by the rising Galactic Empire. The point is that they weren't exactly in a good shape the last time we saw them on screen. So how come they're still around, and what are they even trying to fight? Well, as it turns out, they're not very different from the rebellion, as little groups within the regime continue to rise up throughout the galaxy. Of course, most of these efforts are immediately shut down by the Empire, but hey, at least they're trying. On top of that, the Imperial dominance, despite its strong clutches, is still somehow lenient enough to let these things breathe a little. After all, control isn't always about shutting every single thing down. Plus, they need these little blips to prove that the Empire's still in power and can easily bring the hammer down on revolutionaries. Besides, you've got to let the war economy breathe a bit as well. So while the horrors of the Clone Wars are fresh in everyone's mind, the Separatists are still being afforded some leeway just to act as an example for other rebel movements. As a matter of fact, sometimes the Empire even classifies the rebellion as a separatist cause. What's more, Mon Mothma's playing the long game. Now, there are a lot of threads at play here. Take the Imperial attitude towards the Separatists, for example. The reason why they put those people into the same bracket as the actual rebellion is actually kind of genius. What is it? Well, you see, the general population doesn't like the movement for obvious reasons. So by saying that the Rebel Alliance is a part of the Separatist Alliance, the Empire can somewhat undermine these efforts and win public favor. That said, Mon Mothma's been plotting the rise of the rebellion for a very long time now. In fact, even during the Clone Wars, she teamed up with like-minded politicians like Padme Amidala and Bail Organa to form the Delegation of 2000. Of course, this wasn't technically the Rebel Alliance at that point, as she was just trying to stop the Republic's freefall toward fascism. But it serves as a super important detail, because even back then, she was labeled a traitor by Palpatine. Now, she was lucky enough to not be persecuted like some other members of the committee, as she did a U-turn to support the Emperor. Of course, she didn't totally cut herself off from her roots. In fact, if anything, the Senator kind of doubled down on her apparent leadership of an Imperial Separatist group. Still, Andor shows that all of it was nothing but a ruse, and secretly, she was actually chipping away to get the rebellion off the ground. Not to mention, Cassian's return to the rebellion. Alright, so we know that Mon Mothma's trying to get the Rebel Alliance going, and she's doing all that while serving as an active senator. What's more, her support for the Separatist movements around the galaxy is extremely convincing, so much so that most people seem to think that she's lost the plot. Plus, she's also letting the Grand Vizier Masamita infiltrate her coalition meetings, but obviously she's doing this to throw her Imperial colleagues off her scent. This is where things get interesting though. While Andor never explicitly tells us about her fake and real objectives ever meeting in the middle, they've actually got a lot more in common than you'd think. Our protagonist Cassian Andor, for instance, was a former Clone Wars era Separatist, according to most canon sources. And even though he kinda tries to get away from the rebellion in episode 7, we all know that he's gonna get dragged right back into it. The real surprising thing here is that the Senator's the catalyst that'll set his destiny on the road leading toward Rogue One. You see, it's very likely that he'll be enticed by the divisionary Separatist group that's being headed by Mon Mothma, and that group will then lead him back to the Rebel Alliance, setting the whole Death Star plan in motion. Coming up, is the Empire worse than the Separatists? Now, one of the more nuanced nuanced arguments that people tend to make against the Separatist movement is that it was just as bad as the Empire. After all, with Palpatine controlling the strings for both factions, why would one be less evil? The reality, though, couldn't have been more different. While it's true that the movement was controlled by more corrupt factions of the galaxy, there was actually a ton of support for their cause. The Confederacy of Independent Systems, for example, was made up of worlds that just saw the Republic as a failed governing body, so all they wanted was to gain independence from its corrupt control. Obviously, a lot of these causes lose meaning in the wake of the massive droid army that destroys stuff, but inherently, the Empire is definitely way worse. As a matter of fact, the Imperial forces were oppressive, even when pitched against Separatist worlds, and there was absolutely no remorse or expectation whatsoever in the exercise of their tyranny. Now, for the Empire's treatment of Separatist planets. Of course, hypothetical comparisons don't prove anything, so let's dive into an actual event from the franchise to see just how bad things were under the Empire's rule. In The Bad Batch Episode 10, Common Ground, the Imperial forces are seen descending upon the planet Raxus. Now, if you remember, this used to be the main capital world for the Separatist movement. Here's the kicker though, the Empire tries to use the planet's leaders as puppets and enforce their will upon its citizens. But in an act of defiance, Senator Avi Singh refuses to bow down to the oppressive Imperial policies and asks his people to fight and resist instead. Obviously, the evil guys just get up and imprison him, which leads to his droid aide calling the Bad Batch for help. Also, even though our heroes are a bit reluctant to help him at first, they eventually end up trusting him with their lives, which just shows that the Separatists still have some redeeming qualities, and the same can't be said for the Empire. Finally, the Separatists didn't know about their Sith links. Another thing that makes the Separatists a lot less evil in comparison to the Empire is the simple fact that a lot of its people legitimately thought that they were fighting for a worthy cause. Like the Imperial forces are just straight up all about control and establishing dominance. The Clone Wars movement, on the other hand, had more to do with freedom from the corrupt Republic. Also, these rebel worlds had no idea that they were pawns of Darth Sidious, as they genuinely trusted Count Dooku's word. Besides, the only factions who even knew about Palpatine's existence were on the corporate ladder, like the Trade Federation and the Banking Clan. But even they had no idea that the entire war was a facade for the Sith Lord to rise through the ranks and undermine the Republic. What do you think? Were the Separatists just as evil as the Empire? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.